Welcome to another edition of Anthony T's Horror Show. I'm Anthony T. In this edition, I will be joined by Philip Perron next segment as we're going to talk about our favorite 10 films of 2020. Then afterwards, we will be moving forward, like into 2021. In What's Anthony T Watching, yours truly will be reviewing a film that is definitely not rated PG. Even though it says it in the film's title, the film is not rated PG. I will get to that after I talk about the top 10 films of 2020. And after that, I have a major announcement, as yours truly has decided to do what every other podcast is virtually doing. I finally gave in to it on Facebook, so I'll talk more about that at the end of the podcast. Now, normally I would have the news, but since this is yet another Best of 2020 episode, I'm not going to have time with news because, seriously, I really don't want to talk about the trailer for the new Godzilla vs. King Kong film. I also don't want to talk about all these release date changes, as yes, there have been films that have moved their release date to later in 2021. I'll probably get to that next episode, but this is about the best of 2020. So, when I come back, I will be joined by Philip Perron from Doc Discussions Podcast, and we're going to take a look back at the year of 2020 with our top 10 films of the year. Every day there's a family struggling with hospital bills to care for their sick child who is fighting an illness. There's a woman who is fighting breast cancer and is having trouble making ends meet while paying for their treatment. And there are burn victims that are going through treatments to heal their deep wounds. There is a charity in the horror community that helps these people. Scares That Care is an organization that helps families deal with the bills for their child. They help women get the treatment they need to fight breast cancer, and they help people who are dealing with severe burns get the help they need to heal. Scares That Care is a 100% volunteer organization and 501c3 nonprofit charity that is dedicated to helping these people in fighting real monsters. To find out more information or to donate to Scares That Care, you can go to www.scaresthatcare.org. Every donation helps Scares That Care fight real monsters.
Hey guys, this is Steve and Christina. I am the founder, owner, creator, and host of Super Retro Throwback Reviews. Are you looking for the best movie reviews, music reviews, video game reviews, and Comic-Con coverage all around? Well then look no further. Definitely check out Super Retro Throwback Reviews on YouTube and our new audio podcast, the new and improved Super Retro Throwback Reviews audio files version 2.0 on the following media distributors: Podbean, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify.
Class is over, John. Time for something new and improved.
Welcome back to Anthony T's Horror Show. I'm here with Philip Perron from Doc Discussions Podcast, and we're going to talk about the top 10 films of 2020. How you doing today, Philip?
Well, could be better. I had, unfortunately, a passing yesterday. My father came down with COVID on January 2nd, and 12 days later, he passed away. So he passed away yesterday, and did the funeral things this morning with my siblings. We're holding up, but this will take my mind off of the real world for a little bit.
Definitely, I want to, before I do that, extend my sympathies to you and your family.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. There's been a lot of warmth from social media, from people I work with, neighbors, yourself, and it's greatly appreciated because we're living in a terrible time, and unfortunately it hit me real hard yesterday, and it's such is life, and we move on.
So before we get into the top 10 films, what are your thoughts about the horror releases from this year?
That's a good question. I know a lot of folks were somewhat disappointed, and yet for every person that said so, there was always someone that said it was really good. And I would say that the very top, close to the top 10, is really, really good. So whether everything after that was just whatever, at least the top 10 I felt were real strong. There was a really good amount of films I felt.
Yeah, I was surprised that we got a lot of really good indie films this year. Films that you probably never would hear of. Films that probably would not make a top 10 list. Because every year we usually get a lot of good horror films from the major studios. But this year really provides some really interesting films, to say the least.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Sometimes the more mainstream films kind of overshadow everything else, which is only because people have heard of them and they're pushed big by big companies. But always there's a lot of really good gems. One of my co-hosts on Dark Discussions a long time ago said to me, or to a bunch of folk, is that you can make up a top 10 most wanted, meaning the films that you're most looking forward to, and at the end of the year, that top 10 will be completely different because it'll be a lot of films that you didn't even know existed until they appeared on VOD.
Yeah, this year, pretty much all the most anticipated films, with the exception of one, never got released this year because of the current situation going on. But at least it provided a couple of surprises this year, in my opinion. In terms of films that I did not think would be great, but turned out to be very good films.
Indeed, yeah. There was a lot of good gems that I'm wondering if people who listen to your podcast may already know about because you have an astute listening base. So I don't know if we're going to have too many surprises, but for people who aren't as familiar with the horror community, horror film releases and whatnot, they may find a lot of hidden gems that we're going to bring up tonight.
On that note, why don't we start off our top 10 list? Philip, what is your number 10 film for this year?
Sure. Now, I know that we're doing top genre films, so that isn't just horror films. You mentioned that science fiction and thrillers and fantasy and all that can be included as well. And this will be a controversial choice for you, and it's probably the only mainstream film I have on the list, and that is Wonder Woman 1984. I have it as number 10 because it's definitely not as good as the other 9 films on my list. However, just to see Gal Gadot back in action as Wonder Woman, to see her on what is the big screen at home, because I saw it on HBO Max like most folks did. Kristen Wiig was fantastic as Cheetah and as Barbara Minerva. She really was like toe to toe with Gal Gadot's character in screen time, never mind acting ability. And I know a lot of people liked Pascal as well. I felt that was the kind of the weaker arc, and the reason the screenplay was, I guess, a jumbled mess. But just to have Wonder Woman back on the screen was really good for me.
It was a really big year for Pedro Pascal between that and The Mandalorian, which people should definitely check out The Mandalorian. If you're into horror or not, it's a really great show, and Pedro Pascal is great in that show and also in Wonder Woman 1984. For me, it felt like a step down because it just felt too long at the 2.5 hour running time. Plus, I think also what hurt my enjoyment a little bit was the fact that I did not see this film in a theater, which probably helped in me really not liking this film a lot. It's a 3-star film in my book, but I probably would have enjoyed it a little more if it was in theaters, but...
Yeah, and if people are smart, they will avoid theaters as much as possible at this point. But you're right, Wonder Woman 1984 would have been probably very spectacular on theaters. I know they had a big IMAX release scheduled for it, and obviously a lot of that was scuttled because of the pandemic. Pedro Pascal also, as folks know, was in Game of Thrones, and that's where he first really got noticed. He was great there. But he's also in another film that people may have missed because it's under the radar, and it's also VOD and young adult. But Robert Rodriguez, the director, directed him in We Can Be Heroes, which is a 2020 superhero young adult film on Netflix. And it came out, I think, 2 or 3 days before Wonder Woman. And my kids watched that, and they thought it was great, and he was great in that film, as well as a number of other big actors like Priyanka Jonas was in it as well.
Now, my number 10 film is also going to be a little controversial here because of the way that Shudder presented this. When they released Blood Machines, they released it in like 3 episodes, but you can clearly tell if you're watching it episodically that this is just one straight film. And I consider it in my top 10 as a straight film because after doing a little research on the film, it was basically intended to be a film and not like 3 episodes. But I can understand what Shudder was probably trying to do because of all the graphics and everything. But this film is very good. This film has a lot of great effects. I love the grindhouse look that this film has. As you could clearly tell, it's grainy and something you probably see in a grindhouse film. This film also has a very good final act and a very killer score that helps drive this film along with its killer visuals throughout the whole film. Definitely check out Blood Machines if you have Shudder.
Yeah, that I oddly saw, kind of let it pass by because of exactly what you said. They broke it into like 3 parts, and so I thought it was just some sort of mini series or whatnot. So I never saw it, and I always wanted to go back to it because I then started reading reviews and people talking about it like yourself, saying it was really good. And so unfortunately I missed it for my 2020 list for consideration, but all I've heard is basically what you said, which is it's really good. So my number 9, speaking of Shudder, this is another Shudder film. I guess it's kind of considered a Shudder original, even though I don't know if they produced it. I think they just bought it. But this film is called Anything for Jackson. Came out late in the year, Q4. It's directed by Justin Dick and written by Keith Cooper. These 2 guys are well known for Lifetime, holiday, and family movies, and they always wanted to come out with a horror film, and so they put one together, and it got fantastic reviews by critics as well as audiences, and rightfully so, because it's a really good horror film with a lot of scares, oddly some moments of dark humor, but all in all a straight horror film, and very tragic as well.
This was one of those films that I literally forgot to watch at the end of the year. Part of it maybe because it was released at the end of the year, and usually you're trying to rush through 10 million films at the end of the year, so it pretty much flew under the radar for me, but it did look interesting when I saw the trailer for the film.
Yep, it really is, so definitely worth checking out when you have some time.
My number 9 is the first of 2 documentaries in my top 10. Now, this is a film that I've been wanting to see ever since hearing about this film on the film festival circuit. It's called Wolfman's Got Nods. It is a documentary on the Monster Squad and how the film has survived its following over the years.
Yeah.
Film is directed by Andrew Gower, who was in the Monster Squad film. One of the things I really loved about this documentary is this film does a really good job getting various perspectives of this cult classic. Whether it's the making of the film, whether it's focusing on the fans of the film or the various celebrities that loved the film. It gets a lot of perspective, and it really makes this documentary a very entertaining one. I liked how it moves at a very good pace. This is a documentary that doesn't slow down, and it's really a film that you should check out if you really love the Monster Squad, as this is probably the best documentary you're probably going to get out of this film. It's definitely worth checking out. You can get it on Blu-ray and VOD.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I have to say I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, two girls, and I introduced them to this film in 2020, and yeah, they had the same experience as I did when I saw it as a youngster, and loved it because it has the nod to the Universal monsters. And before the pandemic, I brought them to conventions, and I used to get pictures with people dressed up, cosplaying in these type of creatures and whatnot. And so I was able to. That was my first time revisiting the film since I was a youngster. Yeah, it's a great movie, and I can understand why there would be a documentary on the movie because it definitely has a huge fan base.
Yeah, another thing that I liked about that also was the fact that it was directed by one of the stars of the film, which is usually a rarity when it comes to these hard docs.
Yeah, that's actually really good because not only is there a person there that got to see behind the scenes firsthand, but also they were obviously easier to get a hold of people who are involved because a lot of people that are involved in films are obviously timid when a documentarian comes to them because they don't know if the documentarian is going to spin it a certain way or are they legit. But because it was one of the stars of the film, it makes sense that he would be able to get such a great thing going because it is have 100, believe it or not, it has 100% good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. So he did a good job for sure. My number 8. All right, this is another horror film that no one really heard of until it actually came out. This one came out, I believe, in Q2 of 2020, and was high on many lists at the very beginning of the year. It kind of lost some of its luster by the end of the year because as we see, a lot of great films started coming out even later in the year, even though this one's still a great film. And this film is called 1BR. 1BR is a very small budgeted film. It stars a newcomer named Nicole Bryden Bloom, who's actually from Connecticut. The director is David Marmor. Producer is Alec Mishra. They're really lovers of the genre. The film actually became number 1 or number in the top 5 films on Netflix when it finally was released on Netflix. If you like films about cults, and maybe even a end of the world thing based off of a little twist at the end, this film is really good. High recommend, and I see big things in the future, especially for the lead actress Nicole Bryden Bloom.
That's a film that I really wanted to see but never had the time. I kind of am kicking myself as this is a few films this year that I wanted to see but never had the time. But I may check that one out soon.
Yeah. If you're interested in checking it out and getting some interviews from the film, I was actually lucky enough as a joke. I saw them on Twitter, and I just tweeted out to them, and I got the lead actress, the director, and the producer on my show, and I interviewed them as a joke. We did it like a few weeks after we recorded our episode reviewing the film. But yeah, if you're interested, I'm friends with them now on Facebook, so I could probably help you out there. Just a heads up.
Okay, thank you. My number 8 film is back to Shudder, as a lot of these films on my list you can find on Shudder. This is a film that had no intentions of being good. In fact, I probably wasn't even planning on seeing this film until I started hearing a buzz on this film. So I decided to check it out. And oh yes, it's a really good film. And it's probably one of the best films shot using modern technology, as they shot this film on Zoom. I'm talking about Host. Now, this is a film that is directed by Rob Savage. He does a very great job directing everything here, because he does a very good job with his screenplay, building up the characters alongside writer Gemma Hurley. He also does a great job piecing everything together, because this is one of those films where you didn't have a cast interacting with each other. It was like him working with one actor, then piecing it into the final product. It was something that I learned this year while doing an interview for another film, Social Distance. But it's just amazing how this technology Zoom is starting to catch on with filmmaking. And the fact that we can just direct one actress, then piece it together to make sure all the chemistry is there with all the other actresses. And it really does a great job doing that, because you could not tell that this film was pieced together, as the chemistry between the actresses were spot on. And this film has an insane third act, which really what makes this film very good and very entertaining. Definitely check out Host on Shudder when you can.
Yeah, I actually saw this one. I thought it was a pretty solid film. I definitely wasn't blown away with it as I was thinking I would be, because a lot of people were talking how great it was when it first came out. So I may have had my expectations a little too high. But all in all, it's a really good film. It's only 50 minutes long, believe it or not. So it's I don't know if that's even considered a feature length, but it's a UK product, and it is very familiar because it's similar to Unfriended and films like that. I don't think it's as good as those films. They do show a little more than tell, like Unfriended, at least the first one. But all in all, a nice little 50-minute horror film for sure.
Okay, your number 7 film?
This one is probably my second most expensive film made. Obviously, Wonder Woman 1984 was. This one was supposed to be released at theaters, but of course, with the pandemic, forget about it. This one is kind of more of an action film, even though it has monsters in it, and it is called Love and Monsters. Came out in Q4 of 2020. It's directed by a guy named Michael Matthews, and it stars a number of notable folks, including Michael Rooker. Ellen Holman has a role in it, but the lead, Jessica Henwick, but the lead is Dylan O'Brien, most notably known for a trilogy of films that came out some time ago called Maze Runner. And this one here is basically a post-apocalypse film where chemicals have turned cold-blooded animals into giant monsters, and it's about a coming of age in a sense where our lead character, played by Dylan O'Brien, is trying to leave one underground bunker and go 80 miles to find his girlfriend from before the apocalypse. And you get to meet a dog on the way that becomes his companion. And then Michael Rooker plays a pivotal role as like a father figure. Special effects are great. It has some humor and some very suspenseful moments, and it's a fun film, even family friendly, though for older folk, because it is PG-13, but very high recommend.
Yeah, I recently picked this one up as that recently came out on Blu-ray, so I have to check that one out.
Oh yeah, that's a good pickup, so well done grabbing it.
My number 7 film is Shallow. This is one of those films where it's dealing more psychological horror thriller. It has great direction from Carlos Mirabella Davis, as he does a very good job making sure that the action is moving. Even though most of the scenes are dramatic scenes, they are literally focusing on the main character and all their psychological problems, which is causing all the chaos in the film. The film has a great performance also by Haley Bennett, and she really is an actress that should get more work. She does a great job with the lead character here, as that helped make the film entertaining, and it helped really move the film along. Definitely check out Shallow when you have a chance.
Yeah. You mean Swallow, right? Swallow.
Oh, I am so sorry. It's Swallow. Yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hate Amazon Fire. I really do. They always change the words on you at the last minute.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, Swallow is a really good film. It's a very strong character study. I have it on my top 20. I don't have it on my top 10. Probably because the third act isn't as strong as the first two acts. Haley Bennett most certainly was fantastic in the film. She's actually almost broken into A-list in the past with some films she worked on. A Girl on a Train with Emily Blunt and a few other films. Hasn't made it. Don't know if she will, but either way, she's a fine presence on screen and really hit it out of the ballpark for this very disturbing film.
My apologies, everyone. You're number 6.
Okay, this film was another one that just popped up out of the blue, and I hadn't heard of it until it appeared, and I watched it on opening night when it popped up on VOD. Usually those are Tuesdays or Fridays, and this came out in Q3, and out of the blue, I actually sent out. I thought the film was so good, I actually, as a joke, sent out a message out to the director to see if he would come on, and out of the blue he came on my podcast. Total surprise that he did, and he's actually more well known for the TV series Black Summer, and I had no idea that he was the man behind Black Summer until he came on my show, because I just thought it was some unknown indie director, and I wanted to help promote this great film. And this film is called Alone. It's a 2020 thriller directed by John Hyams, starring a woman named Jules Wilcox and Mark Menchaca, who Mark Menchaca is known for season 1 of Ozark. Also, Anthony Heald, a well-known character actor, is in it as well. It's basically about a woman who is traveling from I think it's California to Washington State, or the vice versa, and she's moving, and she pisses off somebody on the road, and this guy begins to harass her, and we find out that maybe he's not just a road rage person, but possibly a serial killer. Very suspenseful film, very dramatic. Jules Wilcox actually got the role because she was an extra on Chicago Fire or Chicago PD when John Hyams had directed one of the episodes of that show, and he liked her a lot, and he brought her on to this film, and very high recommend. It's actually a remake of a film called Forsvunnen from Sweden, and oddly, the screenwriter of that film also wrote the screenplay for this American version, and that man was Matthias Olsson.
I almost watched that film too at the end. There was like a couple films that I regretted not watching this year. This was one of them. I did pick up the film because I heard it was supposed to be very good. I just never had the time. And then again, I never had the time for Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor as well, so.
Yeah, I missed that one too, unfortunately, Possessor, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. You get all these films and you just run out of time, literally.
Absolutely, literally, it sums it up, yeah.
My number 6 film is a horror anthology film, and no, it's not Glenn Danzig's Veronica. If you listened to last episode, I pretty much went on a 10-minute rant on that film. literally, at the end of the horror whammies. Because I was literally so pissed off. That was like the only film that really pissed me off in 2020. But enough with Glenn Danzig's Veronica. We're thinking positive here, not negative. I'm talking about the horror anthology film The Mortuary Collection, which ended up on Shudder. Now, this is a film that I decided to see when I had a friend of mine write about the film, and he told me it was really good, so I figured I'd eventually check it out. I like Clancy Brown a lot, so that's gonna make me check it out. But I was really surprised that this was a very good horror anthology film. Director Ryan Spindell does a very good job making sure every story, including the film's wraparound segment, is very good. This film has some very horrifying moments, including the first segment with the woman in the restroom. That was creepy. This film also has a very creepy performance by Clancy Brown as Montgomery Dock. I really think this guy could pull off the Tall Man after this film, because I got Tall Man vibes watching Clancy Brown play Montgomery Dock in the film. Everything has a gothic and eerie feel to it. It's definitely worth checking out. It's on Shudder right now.
Yeah, this film, I wasn't really a fan of. If folks know me based off of listening to the Dark Discussions podcast, I'm a person that's not much of a fan of anthology films. This film was chosen by one of my co-hosts as a film to review. And out of the folks that reviewed it, there was 5 of us, myself and one other co-host, Eric, did not like this film at all. I was a little more forgiving than Eric, because being an anthology, if you include the wraparound story, there's 5 stories in this, and I loved the 4th story, and I enjoyed the first story, as you mentioned, and the wraparound story was pretty solid, but I felt the 2 middle stories were absolutely terrible, at least for me. And so I actually almost put this as the worst horror film I've seen in 2020, but I believe there's another film that oddly you're going to mention tonight that I actually disliked even more than this one. But I could see why people do like it, because there is a couple of solid segments in it, and it was a film that has been getting really good reviews based off of critical responses from, if you go to like Rotten Tomatoes or whatnot, it's getting around 70 or 80%. So my number 5 film, this is another a surprise film that came out of nowhere. It came out in Q2, I believe, of 2020, and it got a lot of buzz because it was this independent film that actually became the top box office film for 3 to 5 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks. I can't even remember, but it dominated the summer at box offices because it played at drive-in theaters, and drive-in theaters do include, or I should say, are included in box office. And due to the pandemic, drive-ins are obviously something that is in vogue again. And this film that I'm discussing or talking about is called The Wretched. It's directed by a couple of brothers named the Pierce brothers, starring pretty much unknowns. And basically, it's about this kid that goes to live with his father during the summer because he kind of got in trouble at school and whatever, and so try to clear his head. And when he goes out there, there's one of the lakes of Michigan, there's some sort of supernatural presence that's in the forest that suddenly has come back from many years of dormancy, and he has to figure out the mystery and prevent it from happening. And it actually has a interesting ending as well. So a big thumbs up, high recommend.
Yeah, I also enjoyed The Wretched as well. It's not in my top 10, but I had a very good time with the film. It was very creepy. It really made this a very entertaining film, and it had very good performances as well.
Sure did, yep.
My number 5 film is another documentary. I told you I had 2 documentaries on this list. Now, this is a film that I think should have gotten a better distribution deal, in my opinion. I'm talking about Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. This is a very great documentary on the career of Mark Patton, who's most notably known for Nightmare on Elm Street 2. This film dives into various subjects, including the LGBT issue in the 1980s, the film Nightmare on Elm Street 2, how the film ruined his career, why he left the film business and disappeared to Mexico, and why he was blaming the screenwriter, David Chaskin, for really ruining his career. It also examines his childhood. It's well structured. It explains why the film is a cult classic. It's definitely a very good documentary. If you're a fan of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 or the Nightmare on Elm Street series, I highly recommend you check this documentary out.
Yeah, I have not seen it. I haven't ever seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So when this documentary popped up, I think it's on Shudder, I kind of just passed over it because I hadn't seen, like I said, the second film. It definitely sounded like it was going to be very, I guess, depressing based off of the things you said, and that was another reason why I decided to pass on it. And I wasn't quite sure if the documentary would have all sides. You know, did they interview the screenwriter? Did they interview the director? Or whatever? I don't know. So
directors in this documentary. There's also one point where we get Mark Patton actually trying to look for the screenwriter, and they do have a one-on-one meeting. It's a very good documentary.
Yeah, interesting. All right, yeah. So that's what I heard. I heard it's getting pretty good reviews, and people are enjoying it, like yourself. So yeah, if you're a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, it's probably worth checking out. I do know, or at least I've heard, that the second film isn't as strong as 1 and 3. But if you're a fan of the series, obviously you want to check it out. And if you've seen the film, why not watch the documentary? All right, there's another film that came out of nowhere that I didn't know too much about, and it's actually produced and stars in one of the roles the brother of one of my favorite musicians, Taylor Swift. And this film is called We Summon the Darkness. We Summon the Darkness is a film that has a number of screen queens or final girls or whatever you want to call it, including some big names like Alexandra Daddario. But also Maddie Hasson is really good in the film as well. As I mentioned, Taylor Swift's brother, Austin Swift, was one of the stars, as well as Logan Miller, who's been in a number of genre films, including Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse and a few others. This film is another film that has horror elements, but it also has some dark humor. I really like this film a lot. It kind of reminded me of Satanic Panic, though not as tongue-in-cheek as that film from 2019. But if you like cult films, with devil worship type stuff, and some humor in your horror that isn't over the top or tongue-in-cheek, this film is the film for you. Yeah, so We Summon the Darkness. Big thumbs up for me.
You forgot to also mention Johnny Knoxville also stars in this film as well.
That is true.
As the minister.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep, the father. Plays the father character of one of the other characters in the film. I won't mention it because that kind of is one of the twists.
I really thought the performances were very good as well. It didn't get into my top 10, but it's still a very good film people should check out. My number 4 film is a film that I think you are not going to like. And I can understand people not liking this film, because this is indie horror at its roots. It's basic independent filmmaking, and the fact that it's very surreal. It's a film called The Deeper You Dig. Now, I discovered this film on Shudder. Figured, oh yeah, it's 2020 film, might as well see it, just to get another film onto the list. Never did I think I would really like this film a lot. And one of the reasons why I really liked this a lot was the fact that this film is just so surreal. It has some very dark supernatural moments in the film. This was done by a family, oddly enough, as the film was directed by John Adams and Toby Poser. The film also has Zelda Adams, too, in the film, as Toby Poser's daughter, Echo. This was one of those weird, surreal films that I liked a lot. It's very supernatural, very gothic, and it's worth checking out if you're really into the basics of independent films or indie horror.
Yeah, I think the reason I didn't like it was for the reasons you did. I felt the surreal elements didn't fit with the rest of the story. I can understand why not a lot of people like it. We actually did the film on my podcast, the Dark Discussions podcast, on a suggestion by co-host Eric. Oddly, no one was necessarily overwhelmed with the film, but most of the folks on the podcast liked it, except me. I was the only person that actually disliked it very much. I actually have it as my worst film of 2020, and it's not because it's not well made, but more because of the surreal elements that I still have no idea how they fit in with the rest of the story. But all in all, I would say I'm probably in the minority. All right, so out of my top 10, only 3 of the films I heard of prior to the 2020 year beginning. Wonder Woman 1984, obviously, I heard of. And then this film here in my number 2. This film here actually is a director that I kind of follow because I've liked his prior films. And that's the main reason why I knew it was coming out. And that film is called VFW. This film is directed by Joe Begos, and oddly, he had a film that came out only a month. This came out in January, so Q1 of 2020, and in Q4 of 2019, he had another film that literally came out by another, I believe, production company called Bliss, and that film is great too. He's a director out of Connecticut, near Danbury, Connecticut. Another film he did was Almost Human, Mind's Eye, which actually takes place in Danbury, Connecticut. And this one here has a really great cast of people, a lot of well-known actors, including Martin Kove, who's the star of Cobra Kai, which is a well-known show right now on Netflix. But Stephen Lang stars in it, Fred Williamson, everybody knows him, William Sadler. It's basically a bunch of, in a post-apocalypse punk world, a bunch of ex-military guys hanging out at the local VFW, unfortunately get stuck into a drug war because some woman that stole some drugs runs into the VFW, and then these all drugged out punks begin to surround the VFW, and they have to fight for their life. So it's a shoot 'em or sack 'em type of film, and really great film. I actually thought this would be my best film of the year for a long time, and it still is one of the best. In any year, I could have this as a top 3 horror film again. Big thumbs up, VFW.
Yeah, that was also a very good film as well. I enjoyed it a lot. It's not on my top 10, but I like the action in the film. Plus, there's some very good performances from William Sadler and Stephen Lang. It's definitely worth checking out. My number 3 is a film that hit theaters this year, just right before theaters closed. It is Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. When I first heard about this film, I thought to myself, why are they remaking The Invisible Man? But of course, Leigh Whannell was going to direct, so I was going to see this film anyway because I loved his last one, Upgrade. But this film really surprised me a lot. It showed that Leigh Whannell can direct performances, as there's a lot of dramatic material within this film. It also has a very great performance by Elizabeth Moss, as I think that was pretty much the best performance all year. She really does a great job making her character emotional, which was needed for this film to work. And I also like how they use the technology to its advantage in this film, because this could have easily gone south because it was the Invisible Man for like the 500th time. But I like how this felt a lot different from previous versions of the Invisible Man. Is definitely one of the best films of the year, and it's my number 3 film.
Yeah, this film actually doesn't make my top 10 combined list, but my horror list that I have for the Dark Discussions podcast, it is a top 10 horror film for me. I, too, am a big Leigh Whannell fan. I thought Upgrade was the best film of 2018, and I ranked it as my favorite genre film of 2018, and arguably one of my favorite films in the past few years. So when this one came out, I was very excited as well. Obviously, my expectations were probably hyped because Upgrade was the greatest film ever. That when I saw this film, it didn't match Upgrade, I feel, and I actually think Upgrade showed already that Leigh Whannell was a great director. So this really was just a follow-up as a director. So the question was, would it be as good? And most critics say most certainly it is as good. I'm just a little less because I guess I'm more into the cyberpunk feel. I love cyberpunk even more than horror. So I prefer Upgrade. But this film, yes, I agree. It's a great film. Though, even though Moss was great, there was really a lot of great female roles in horror this year, and I know of a handful more that were probably equal or even better, including my number 1 when we get to it, and my number 2. But, oh no, yeah, you're right. Moss hit it out of the ballpark. Okay, yeah, my number 2 film actually surpassed my number 3 film as the best film of the year when it came out, and I thought this film, too, would hang on to be the best film of the year, and it did pretty close until Q4. And this film was the third and last film I heard of before 2020 began. And this film is called The Lodge. The Lodge is a film directed by the 2 German or Austrian directors. Either way, they're Teutonic folk. Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, who I think directed the film Goodbye, Mommy. And I didn't really like that film. I felt that film was kind of a ripoff of A Tale of Two Sisters, among other films. So I wasn't really looking forward to this film, even though I knew it was coming out. Though I did like the lead actress, Riley Q, who is probably well known for a number of genre films, including Mad Max and being the granddaughter of the King, Elvis Presley. She really is awesome in this film, and the film is about cults, which is always a good thing. Big twists, because is the film really supernatural or not? And the ending blows you away. I really, really like this film, and it's a high recommend. It's dark, brooding, slow film, but when it has its scary moments, they're really great.
That's a film that I literally totally forgot all year for some reason. It's when you're inundated with films, some films usually get lost in the shuffle. And The Lodge, I think, was one of those films that I wanted to see, but never got the time this year for some reason. Because I literally went through 70 films this year, which is like a record for me. And I kind of missed that one too.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, definitely try to check it out. I know it's free on Hulu, and it may be available other places for free. But obviously, you can rent it or buy the disc or whatever anywhere. But definitely check it out when you have some time.
My number two film is a film that I was looking forward to. In fact, it was the only film that I was anticipating in 2020 that was released. It was the Richard Stanley Nicolas Cage collaboration. I wondered how this film would turn out. And thankfully, it really turned out to be a very surreal, very dark film. I'm talking about Color Out of Space, which is based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. This was the first narrative film from Richard Stanley in what seems like ages. You literally have to go back to, I believe, 1992 for his last narrative film, because he's lately been doing shorts and documentaries. I really don't know why it took so long between 1992 and 2020 for a narrative feature for Richard Stanley, because I think that he is very good with narrative features. Check out his cult classic Hardware for that example, and this film as well. He really does a great job directing this film. He actually is able to control Nicolas Cage for most of the film, which is good. Because some films you just get the typical Nicolas Cage performance, and every time it just gets annoying. Thankfully, it was toned down somewhat for most of the scenes. And when you got the typical Nicolas Cage performance in that scene, it was worth it. Because you don't have to have him go neurotic every 2 seconds. I like how he's able to control the typical neurotic of Nicolas Cage, as he really makes sure to bring that out of him when he needs it. And it really helped with Nicolas Cage's performance in the film, because I think this is one of his better films in the last 10 years alongside Mandy. He also has very good effects with this film, as the effects in this film are amazing. In fact, this would probably be the best film with special effects if it wasn't for Blood Machines, which I talked about, which was just pretty much an effects fest. But I like how everything looked good with the effects, as it really contributed to the tension and dread, as it gave the scenes an eerie vibe to them, which is needed to emulate an H.P. Lovecraft film. Definitely check out Color Out of Space. It's a very good H.P. Lovecraft adaptation.
Yeah, this is an interesting film because you mentioned Richard Stanley. First off, this doesn't make my top 10 combined list, but it did make my top 20 combined list. Richard Stanley kind of got blacklisted because of the fiasco of the Island of Dr. Moreau, where he was brought on by big budget Hollywood after, like you said, Hardware, and he was the next big director. And his career got derailed, and he got blacklisted because of that film, because the producers wanted their say and whatever, and he kind of hung up, so to speak, directing until a couple of folks that produced this film, Daniel Noah and Elijah Wood from Lord of the Rings, convinced him to come back and offered him full reign. And once again, as it shows, he's more the director of Hardware than the crap fest the producers screwed up with on the Island of Dr. Moreau. Yeah, Nicolas Cage was really good in this film, so he got a career boost as well as Richard Stanley because of this film. It is a good adaptation. The story is hard to beat, because the story is just absolutely phenomenal. They changed it to the present day, obviously, because the story is from the 19 teens, basically. And yeah, the special effects are really good, and the acting was great. Good cast because it did have like Jolie Richardson as well as Tommy Chong. So I would agree. Most people like this. I know one of my co-hosts, Mike from the Dark Discussions, actually rated it as his best horror film of the year.
Yeah, even Tommy Chong didn't seem like the typical Tommy Chong performance, as he was toned down. That is literally a credit to Stanley's direction as well.
Indeed, indeed, and they're already talking of him doing another H.P. Lovecraft film with Elijah Wood and Daniel Noah, because they all worked really good as producer to director. That they're thinking of bringing him back and maybe do 3 or 4 more films. So I don't think we've seen the last of Richard Stanley.
I hope not, because he's a very talented director when given full control.
You know, it's funny too. He's still fairly young. He's only 54. So it just shows you how much success he had back in the 90s before his career got derailed. And now, 30 years later, now that he's not in his 20s and he's more mature in his 50s and he has the right producers, I think you're right. I think we're going to see some good stuff in the next 15 to 20 years from Richard Stanley.
Okay, Phil, what is your number one film of 2020?
Yeah, this is another one that blew me away. This one actually came out in Q4. It is also on Shudder. It actually stars a pretty good actress that was in a horror film called Emily a few years ago. That's a babysitter horror film. She's a Irish actress, but this film here is a Northern Irish film, and it's called A Good Woman is Hard to Find. Basically, again, it's on Shudder, so anybody who subscribes to Shudder can see this. It's considered more of a thriller than horror, but there's pretty some horrific elements that happen. But basically, she's a widow with 2 children. Her daughter is healthy, both mentally and physically, but her son was with the father when he was murdered on the street. So he's become, I guess, mute. And the police refuse to look into the crime because they just think it was a drug-related crime. They think he was a petty drug dealer. She's absolutely sure it was not that because her husband was not a criminal. And then some odd things begin to happen where, living in the area she lives, which is fairly working class, a 2-bit drug dealer steals drugs from a big dealer, hides out in her house, and she has to protect her family from him. And then that leads to figuring out that the murderer of her husband may be something more nefarious than she ever thought. And the ending is absolutely phenomenal. It's probably one of the best horror endings you'll ever see. So yeah, A Good Woman is Hard to Find, directed by Abner Pistole. 2 of the biggest thumbs up I can give a film for 2020.
I will definitely have to check that one out, as is another film that literally I missed.
Yeah, and the good thing is it's right there on Shudder, and as you said, you subscribe to Shudder, so you can check it out whenever you want. Yep, big thumbs up.
My number one film of 2020 is literally the last film I watched in 2020. The first thing I thought when I finished this film was that this film is definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, the horror genre's version of Fargo. I'm talking about a film called The Wolf of Snow Hollow. It is written, directed, and stars Jim Cummings. This film got my interest because this is one of the last films from Robert Forster, rest in peace, who's done some really good work, such as Jackie Brown.
Oh, the Lady in Red, a Roger Corman film from back in the 70s.
Twin Peaks. That's what I was thinking of too.
Okay, yeah, he was on Twin Peaks too. All right, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I literally.
The Black Hole. Remember that film, The Black Hole?
Yep. And also was in a lot of Grindhouse films as well.
Yeah, like Alligator. That was another big one in the 70s. Yeah.
So that's what initially drew me to The Wolf of Snow Hollow. This film was just great.
He's actually in a film that you just reviewed in your video vlog too, Uncle Sam.
Yeah, Uncle Sam 2, which I haven't seen yet, but I literally did the video vlog was basically all the pickups I picked up.
Right. Yeah, and he's in that one too.
Yes, he is. And that's probably one of the reasons why I also picked that film up. Now, back to The Wolf of Snow Hollow. This was a very good film. This was one of those films where I could say this is the best film of any year. This film has great direction. This film has very good performances, not only by Jim Cumming, it also has good supporting performances from Robert Forster, which I just mentioned, Riki Lindholm. Everything was just good. It's quirky. It's bloody. It's one of those films where it balances everything out to make it a very great film. And it has a very good ending as well. This is definitely a film people should be going out of their way to check out, as The Wolf of Snow Hollow is currently on DVD and Blu-ray and VOD.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one. I know one of my co-hosts on the Dark Discussions, co-host Mike, he actually has it in his top 10. A lot of folks are saying it's really good. I know Jason Lloyd of Horophilia gave it a big thumbs up. I think Mark from what's the podcast? The Horrorcast actually said it was big film for him too. So yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it. I think I kind of skipped it only because I think it's only VOD rental, or at least when I was looking at it, it was only VOD rental, and you only have so much time and so much money to spend on watching films, and so that's the only reason I had skipped it.
Yeah, definitely check it out when you have a chance. It is just that good.
Nice.
Well, Philip, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast and talking about the best films of 2020.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun talking about films from the prior year and ranking them, doing the retrospect and all that. And our lists weren't much alike, which is interesting. So this is, I think, the first year that I've co-hosted with someone where we didn't have one film that was identical, which was kind of odd.
Yeah, I think maybe it's because of the fact that there weren't consensus films released this year, which is probably one of the reasons. Because we were supposed to get A Quiet Place 2, the Candyman reboot, and a ton of other horror films that never got released, got pushed back to 2021. So I'm hoping next year it's going to be a big year for horror once the theaters reopen and everything. So I'm hoping 2021 is going to be a big year, as there's a lot of films I want to see that carry over from last year. Plus, you also got Terrifier 2 probably coming out as well, hopefully, this year. So 2021 is going to be an interesting year. I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast again, Philip.
Yep, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And have a good day.
You too.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the films, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
conscious he's a robot too.
Oh, I consider the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers are smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
This is Carrie.
This is Billy.
This is Mr. Bo.
And we are from A Podcast from Beneath. You can catch us every Wednesday wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Don't forget, you can find Anthony T's Horror Show on social media, over on Facebook, Instagram, and Slasher app at Anthony T's Horror Show, on Twitter at Anthony T's Horror. If you liked this episode, you can subscribe to Anthony T's Horror Show over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. You can also catch Anthony T's Horror Show over on DocDiscussions.com, where you can find my podcast and other podcasts on the Doc Discussions Network. What's Anthony T watching? Well, yours truly is watching a film that was definitely not PG. In fact, yours truly was watching his first 2021 film of the year, as it's never too early to start thinking of the best of 2021. Now, this is a film that is directed by a director who has directed such great films as Manborg, that was a good one, The Void, that was definitely a very underrated horror film. People should definitely check that film out if they're in the mood for something very frightening. That is a great film that I don't see many people talk about, but surely worth checking out. And yes, he did do a Leprechaun film, as he directed Leprechaun Returns, along with co-directing Father's Day. I'm talking about Steven Kostanski. And yes, he has yet another film out, more in the vein of Manborg and Father's Day. It's called PG Psycho Gorman. That's right, a film titled Psycho Gorman. That's where filmmaking has gone in 2021 when you have a film titled Psycho Gorman. And get the PG reference in the beginning? This film would have been seen by me no matter what, because the trailer for this film is just insane. And the film itself makes the trailer look like a Disney movie, because it's just 90 minutes of pure insanity in a very good way. I really had a lot of fun with this film, as this really goes back to the Astron 6 days, in which Kostanski was a part of for Father's Day, as this film is just crazy from start to finish. This is like one of those films where bleep happens, and it's just out of control. One of the main things I really liked about this film was the way that the action sequences were created and executed, because this film could have been just a garbage film, but Kostanski does a good job with the way he sets up his scenes, whether it's in the screenwriting process or the way he directs them, because it provides very good moments in this film, which is just gonna make you laugh. Seriously. This is one of those films where you just check your brain at the door. This is some of the stuff that you will never see a major studio do. Seriously. This film is pretty much about a girl and her monster. It's just crazy. And Kostanski does a very good job making sure that there's so much absurdity in this film that you're having a fun time watching this film. I like how he really does a great job with the humor in the film, because he really balances that out very well with a lot of the horrific scenes in this film. This film is very gory. I would even say this is over the top gore. But this is more of like a splatter comedy, if anything. It's just a great film. I really can't say enough. I kind of wish this was released at the last part of 2020, because that would definitely been on my top 10 films in 2020, because that film is just so fun to watch. And I'm literally surprised that this was a fun film. It really lived up to the expectations of the trailer, and besides the screenplay and the action, I thought this film had very good gore effects, very good special effects, and very killer creature effects. I really liked the look of the way the creatures looked in that film. It's just amazing at how much Kostansky and his team did with a low budget, because this film was just top-notch effects with all the gore and everything. It's just insanity. It is just one of those films where you really have to check your brain at the door. This is just pure fun, very gory, very entertaining, and also has a very good story that really complements all the insanity that goes on in this film. Definitely rent this film on VOD. I'm definitely going to buy this film when it hits Blu-ray, because that's not a question. That is just 90 minutes of pure insanity. It really is one of those films where it's a complete 180 from The Void, as this is just fun to watch and really is something that fans of Troma will enjoy. I can guarantee you that much. If you love Lloyd Kaufman or Troma's work, you will definitely love Psycho Gorman. It's gory, it's over the top, and it's just fun from the first minute to the last minute. Please rent this on VOD, as this is really a fun film, and quite frankly, this would have easily made my top 10 list of 2020 if this film hit in 2020, but it didn't. It got released, I believe, a week ago, so definitely check out PG Psycho Gorman. It's pure insanity that horror and gore fans are going to enjoy, as this is literally the first 5-star film of 2021. I just love this film, and you should definitely rent this on VOD, as Psycho Gorman is pure Troma-esque insanity. I told you I had a major announcement at the beginning of the podcast, and the major announcement is Anthony T's Horror Show now has an official Facebook group. So type in Anthony T's Horror Show podcast group on Facebook, and there you can join the official podcast group of Anthony T's Horror Show. It's going to be different from the regular Facebook page, as the regular Facebook page will feature more of like pictures of stuff that I brought, Throwback Thursday photos, plus podcast announcements and everything. It'll have all the news regarding the podcast and the various posts on social media. But the podcast group is where I'll talk about news stories, where you can post your recent episodes of your podcast, YouTube videos, so on. Just type in Anthony T's Horror Show podcast on Facebook, and you can join there. Also, I'll start production on the second part of my Black Friday video very soon, so keep an eye on that. With that, definitely subscribe to Anthony T's Horror Show on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you for listening to this episode. Have a good day. Stay safe and support indie horror.